Greetings, all, and welcome to Esoteric Babble.
In the late 90s, I ended up moving to New York City. I first tried my hand at music copying. Um, that wasn't very steady. I ended up working at Barnes and Noble for about a year. And then I ended up getting a job at a library in a college. And for someone who had gone to grad school, and it just seemed kind of like this is great, you get to work around books and students, you're helping students, you're helping people. And it just turned out to be like a very frustrating, not horrible job in the scheme of jobs, but not not very rewarding. And for someone like me who was just an assistant, there was no real future there. There wasn't any uh, real hope of like ever getting a raise. I worked there for like 5 years, but it wasn't ever going to go anywhere. Um, and I want to share one incident um, from the about one incident at the library, and maybe just a little bit before that, just to say that you might think working in a library would be really pretty easy, right? Like pretty laid back, but a library in a college is, of course, not its own entity. It's answerable. It exists in a framework or in a hierarchy, and ultimately that goes up to the president, and what the goals of the president are. And the goals of the president were to make money for the school, and possibly for himself, not so much to not well, let's say it like this, probably didn't view the library as a means of making money. And it was not the sort of, um, the library was not something where they were interested in like making it, for instance, run smoother. So it was really sort of understaffed. It was so crowded. I mean, we're talking about a school in Manhattan. You can imagine a lot of students, not a lot of space. Um, and not enough people really working and to cover everything. So you just end up being completely stressed out, and you're doing your best, and you also have people making decisions. And while they're saying that the students are the primary focus, it doesn't seem to be the case. So, and one example I think will prove that. Their library had a lot of computers, and as computers are wont to do, they would break down sometimes for whatever reason, you know. And you would have to put an out of order sign on them because you get so many people coming in, and you want to, there's no need for someone to think that a computer is going to work when it isn't. So, you just kind of put a sign on the computer, out of order. Then I get a call one day from the IT department, and the person says, well, hey, the president doesn't want people walking by and looking in on the library and seeing an out of order sign, because this was like on the first floor. And wants you to take those down, doesn't want you to put those up. And it's like, well, then come fix the computers. Because the big problem with the whole situation is that the IT department would wait at least a day. You know, it's one thing if you know someone's coming to fix something in an hour, but when they're waiting and waiting, you put the sign up. And to me, that just illustrates how the world actually works. It's a facade. There are people in power who may claim to have certain interests at heart and be guided in their decision making by, a vision of helpfulness, when in fact it's all just a facade. It's just, hey, we want things to look good. We don't really care if they are good. And So I wanted to share that, and then I wanted to just talk a little bit about something that helped me, was pretty therapeutic for me and probably for many people, was the movie Office Space. So, Office Space, when I actually missed it when it came out, I saw it much later, like on DVD. And when I did, it was therapeutic, it was cathartic. I thought, yes, this is, they're documenting like what a frustrating experience it is to work in an environment where, y- the kind of the bosses are not real, maybe, what would we say, gifted or maybe even intelligent. Now, I want to say, where I worked, I had an immediate boss who was amazing. He was extremely amazing. There were other people in the library who had worked there for quite a long time who were amazing. The director of the library, not so much so. And this was kind of known. And so anyway, I seeing Office Space, I just thought, yeah, this is really. I mean, and it was funny, so it wasn't like a depressing documentation. It was enjoyable to watch. But recently, and I really think because of another video that I can't find on YouTube, but um, I actually would put Office Space in the category of something like The Matrix or Dark City. And I would say it offers a slightly different take on uh, how our reality is sort of maintained or controlled. You might throw like The Truman Show or even They Live. I'm sure you could come up with a long list of movies. Now, all these other movies, I think, but let me pedal that back a little and say, let's really maybe focus on The Matrix, Dark City to a certain extent. Um, in the case of The Matrix, you really have a super intelligence that's in control. They're in basically pretty much complete control. Um, Obviously, some things they aren't able to control, and uh, which is, um, you have someone like Neo able, and there are, I suppose, outside. Part of that is because there are people who are not under the control of the Matrix, so there are other factors at play. But basically, for most of the people living in the Matrix, they don't know that there's this, that they're living in a computer simulation. Um, but that's very different from, say, Office Space. Now, the thing about Office Space is we live in a very hyper literal uh, culture, and you watch Office Space. It's about people's experience in an office. It's funny, but it's also metaphoric. And if you start to think about the world as the office, that the office in that movie portrays our world, and you know um, the sort of ridiculous things you have to go through. Um, you start to see like what I would say is a different picture of the demiurge. So in Gnosticism, and I don't know much about Gnosticism, just in broad outline, but um, roughly speaking, the true God, we might say the one, is um, goodness, beauty, truth, consciousness um, is these things. The demiurge is an emanation, and either completely maybe evil and powerful, something like the Matrix, or maybe just inept and bumbling. And I think that is the vision that Office Space uh, shows us, documents that it's possible that the world is just not only the world, but that if there were, and again, this is a metaphor. I'm not saying that this is how things are. We don't always want to be hyper literal. The smoke from the fire is finding me. Um, we don't always want to be hyper literal. Um, the the demiurge is a great way to understand. Like, it's something that's sealing us off from the real light. And it's interesting in the Office Space how um, the main character does sort of become spiritually awakened, and that guides him. He becomes liberated, and others sense that in him. He actually kind of becomes the Uber worker by not doing anything. There's sort of a Taoist uh, reading there, but he ends up sort of, his awakening, of course, isn't complete, and he ends up being attracted, to money, to making some money, and then realizes there's this big problem. Um, so that is, of course, a lesson that our, um, until we have rooted out all desire, all thirst, all addiction for power, um, whether that's wealth or just, like political or just control of people or situations, until that's all rooted out, there is a danger that we can be kind of led back into this. We can be led astray. Um, and so that's one thing that happens. Of course, he ends up uh, persevering. And the ending of that film, I think, is also um, something that you can take in a metaphorical way. He ends up working, for the street department. And on the one hand, it looks like, well, that would be a worse job. But he has found, in the context of the movie, a better job. Um, it might not seem as materially comfortable, but for him, much better, much more rewarding, and much more, maybe even seems like it has a real purpose. Um, and I think this is the sort of thing that uh, the hanged man in the tarot deck is telling us, that sometimes real wisdom, or the really wise, or those who are liberated, they are at odds with society. And that's where this person ended up. He was perfectly happy there, not happy in the office. And so, likewise, it might be that not making a lot of money is, in fact, um, a way to be happier at times. Now, again, I'm not saying no money, but when money and status are uh, the driving, maybe, principles, and we want bigger and more, there can be problems, right? So I just thought that, Office Space is a good place to start, and a good way to understand um, the spiritual journey. It's a good way to understand our world. And, dear listener, I am, as always, interested in what you have to say. Peace.